We'll move on to our next session as we speak about BUILD, Establishing Identity at Birth, Foundational ID Issuance for Newborns, shedding light on the impact of ID issuance for newborns in establishing a robust and inclusive identity framework from the very start. We have Annina Wersun, who's co-founder and Chief Impact Officer, OpenCRVS, who will be leading this session.
Thank you, Rosemary. Good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful. That lunch was delicious, but I do hope that we can get a bit of energy back in the room to talk about something incredibly important, which is exactly as I was just introduced, establishing identity at birth, foundational ID issuance for newborns. Oh, thank you. Just press that guy. Okay, perfect. So we're here to talk about identity management systems. And we strongly believe that we need to start talking about identity right from birth. And that's exactly what we do at OpenCRVS. For those of you who have not heard of OpenCRVS, we're a not-for-profit organization, which is the home of OpenCRVS, a digital public good specifically for civil registration and vital statistics. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this SDG 16.9. which gives us 5 years, 10 months, and 3 days to ensure that we provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. That's 2,128 days to fulfill the promise that many of you in this room have made. And it's no surprise that in this Sustainable Development Goal, it says including birth registration. Now, while there's a lot of focus on ID systems, which is incredibly important, we want to make sure that we're recognizing, protecting, and providing for every person on the planet from birth. Now, where are we at with this target now? You saw it in the plenary. I'm going to repeat it now because this number is obviously not acceptable. There's still 850 million people around the world who don't have official proof of identity. And over half of those are children whose births have not been registered. So we have absolutely no way of achieving SDG 16.9 if we don't start taking civil registration seriously, registering every birth, but not only that, unlocking the massive potential value that doing so has for a country's society and economy. Some of you familiar with CRVS, that's civil registration and vital statistics, will be familiar with this definition from United Nations Statistical Division. The continuous, permanent, compulsory, and universal recording of the occurrence and characteristics of vital events. So that's births, deaths, marriages, divorces, adoptions, and other civil status events. And the use of that data for vital statistics purposes. This definition remains true. It's very important to ensure that these vital events are registered, a certificate's issued, and that data is shared for planning purposes with government. But I would argue in this day and age, when we're talking about digital public infrastructure, when we're talking about unlocking the value that digital services and digital IDs have, we need to go beyond this traditional definition. In 2017, the ID4D World Bank team said this. They said, robust CRVS systems linked to identity management systems and tailored to local contexts form the foundation of all sectors and pillars of the economy and contribute to the SDGs to end poverty and ensure prosperity for all. And they're absolutely right. For countries designing robust and comprehensive ID management systems, we can't just be talking about ID, we have to be talking about civil registration and ID and the issuance of a unique identification number from birth for life. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's session. But why is this so important? Well, for people, it really matters. It matters for individuals to have a proof of legal identity from birth for a lifetime. Not just at the age of 18 when I can get an ID card, but right from birth. And why is that important? It's important because this ensures that every person on the planet is recognized, protected, and provided for. Recognized because they can demonstrate who they are through the legal identity. I exist in the eyes of the law. Protected through the laws that should protect those individuals. And provided for when it comes to integration between civil registration ID, because these individuals will then have a unique identification number that allows them to access services in a digital world. But it's not just important for individuals, it's also critical for government. Why? Because we want to ensure that identity fraud is reduced. If we don't know when people are dying, how many people's identities are being stolen and being mismanaged and misused for purposes that obviously damage both society and the economy. I'm sure all the governments present in the room want to save some money, and we can absolutely do that through a robust civil registration system integrated with ID, because we can inform the ID system of when deaths occur so that social welfare payments can be stopped, pensions potentially, and a number of other ones. We want to reduce those welfare leakages. And finally, governments have the opportunity to fulfill their promise to leave no one behind by making legal identity universal. And obviously the impacts both on society functioning in the best way possible and the economy benefiting from everyone's formal involvement in it doesn't need to be over-explained. And beyond this, and just food for thought, because the focus of this presentation will be on the links between civil registration and ID, for any countries who are considering digital public infrastructure and developing their DPI strategy, we would implore you to put civil registration right at the heart of that strategy with ID management, with ID, because ultimately, collectively, you're going to be creating comprehensive ID management. We've already spoken about this linkage here, and I'm going to be focusing on this in today's session, the links with national ID and all the benefits that I just mentioned. But we can also talk about social assistance programs. And I'm going to be speaking on the panel with our other colleagues on Thursday about interoperability with social protection systems and the value that can be unlocked, the stimulation of the economy that can provide. And that's all starting right from birth, with integration with civil registration, ID, and social assistance programs. Let's think about healthcare, ensuring that everyone has a unique identification number and a unique medical record from birth, once again. Education, ensuring enrollment, again, and participation, ensuring that no one is left behind. And of course, ensuring that you've got a trusted source of population data that you can build not only a robust ID system, but also a voter registration. But we've got to start at the beginning. And the beginning for us is birth registration within a civil registration system. But where are we at? It's not the prettiest picture. 1 in 4 children around the world do not officially exist. They do not have any legal identity. 2/3 of the world's deaths are unrecorded. So we've got a long way to go. And at OpenCRVS, this is our mission. Our mission is to ensure that every person on the planet is recognized, protected, and provided for. And we're trying to create the new gold standard for digital civil registration, both providing an implementation option for countries, but also for countries who are going to be designing and building their own solutions or working with a proprietary vendor to build it. Please look at our specifications, learn from what we've learned. We spend a lot of time in a lot of countries with registrars, with people at the community level to ensure, sorry, that's a bit faded now, there we go, to ensure that we really understand users' needs and we really try and create opportunities to achieve universal birth registration. So what do we need to do to actually bring about these changes? Well, from a civil registration perspective, we need to, probably quite obvious from the numbers I just showed you, increase the number of life events recorded. We need to ensure that the data that we capture is high quality and meaningful so that it can become the trusted source of life events for the whole of government. We need to protect personal data. And we need to make system implementation and maintenance easy. Just as was discussed in the plenary by Naga, we need to ensure that implementations of these systems does not take years, but that people can get them up and running and vital events can start to be registered as soon as possible. That's what OpenCRVS aims to do. It's an open source digital civil registration system designed to positively transform civil registration services in low resource settings. A few things to focus in on there. First of all, it's open source. So the license obviously is free, and individuals, organizations, and countries can take that and use them themselves. It's designed to positively transform civil registration services. This isn't about digitizing manual processes that don't work. This is about rethinking service delivery and using technology as an enabler to do so, to ensure that you can achieve universal registration. For that to happen, things need to change. And finally, we've done this specifically, designed the system specifically for low resource settings, because we recognized that a lot of the solutions out there weren't designed for low connectivity areas, weren't designed for people with low digital literacy. And so we need to address these challenges through the use of smart design, smart technology, to ensure that the system is fit for purpose in all settings around the world. Now, OpenCRVS is being used across 3 continents already at different stages. In the Pacific island of Niue, the system's live and it's being used, and a number of other Pacific islands beginning their journey now. In Cameroon, it's live in 20 municipalities, registering births, deaths, and marriages. The Philippines have just signed an MOU to start working on the national rollout of the system. In Madagascar, a pilot is underway, and we're looking at scaling opportunities there. In just a few weeks, work on production setup in Somalia is building, and our colleagues here at the front leading the way at Uganda, proof of concept also underway, and hopefully also proving exactly what we're going to talk about today, the integration with MOSIP. And that's exactly what this slide here begins to show. So up here, you'll see kind of the more traditional civil registration, the registration of vital events, obviously directly through the OpenCRVS system, or any civil registration system for that matter. Integration with health to receive notifications and also to share data back, and sharing data with the National Statistics Organization. That's the traditional view of civil registration. Now what we're doing is integrating with, in this case, MOSIP, but also, again, any ID system, to generate a unique identification number that can subsequently be used for life. And we're going to be demonstrating exactly how we do that at the moment, and what work is also planned as we really think about the future and what digital technologies can enable. And obviously, with that foundational ID from birth, integrated with ID, we unlock and enable a whole suite of government service delivery options, ensuring financial inclusion, again, not from the age of 18, from birth, voter registration, access to education, and so on and so forth. We cannot think about these 2 systems separately anymore. They are intrinsically linked in the development of foundational identity management systems that also should be at the center of effective digital public infrastructure. So here we are, the good stuff. This is what I get to take the credit for, but really it's the technical teams at MOSIP and OpenCRVS who have done the hard work on this. And we kind of call ourselves family now because we see that this relationship is so close, and so we work really closely with the MOSIP team. So what does it mean for interoperability when it comes to birth? Well, it's a few things. It's about authenticating the parents' or the caregivers' IDs. It's about making users' experience easy by populating declaration forms and ensuring data quality. It's about linking the birth registration number with ID and creating a national ID for life. And that's really what you want to be taking away for this. Without this integration, you're going to be waiting till 18 to really provide this unique identification number. So we start off by filling out the digital declaration form within OpenCRVS. And when we complete the ID details of the parents and the informant, we're going to authenticate those details using eSignet. The parent and those informants are going to consent to, one, that they are that person, and also consent to sharing some details back with OpenCRVS. The birth is then going to be registered, and the birth registration number is shared with OpenCRVS, and an application ID, that's equivalent of a tracking ID, associated with the ID, is going to come, and it's going to be on the birth certificate. Important to note that OpenCRVS will never have access or store the unique identification number or the visual ID. And then MOSIP will send the national ID number, or visual ID, some call it, directly to the parents or caregivers of that child, so they have that for their life. When it comes to death, again, we're authenticating people's identities, the informant, for instance. We're populating the declaration form, and we're creating and sharing the ID with MOSIP to ensure that that ID is deactivated in the system so that people can no longer use it to access services, they can no longer use it to claim benefits, and there's an up-to-date ID registry as well. Again, that process is very similar. The death declaration form is completed. We authenticate the informant's ID. They provide consent to put that information within the system. The death is then registered. The application ID is put on the death certificate, and the national ID is then deactivated. So if that ID is used to access any services, then obviously it's not possible because that ID is no longer active. You've heard enough from me. I'm going to show you actually how this works with a short demo. While they're getting this working, we do also have this demonstration available at the booth, and you can come and get either a live demonstration or watch the video, and you can also interact with the OpenCRVS system itself if you're interested in learning more. If needed, I can just voice over this, but should we go back to the beginning and it'll just, sorry, Prince, who stayed up very late on Friday night completing this video, who's just sat there. Unfortunately, we can't hear his dulcet tones, but he is at the booth, so you can hear them then. He's got a very melodic voice, unlike mine. But we'll start from the beginning here. So we're in the OpenCRVS application right now. And you can see here we're going to start a birth registration declaration. So you can see here, we're going to start a birth declaration. Here's one we made earlier, so that you don't have to watch the entire process, and we were limited to just 5 minutes for this demo. It usually takes about 20. But when we come to the mother's details, we're going to click Authenticate here. And we're taken to the eSignet platform that we use to authenticate. We're entering...
Receive a notification asking her to provide consent to sharing her details. This will be done by entering the generated one-time password into the eSignet portal. This will then give the mother the option to choose which additional details she wants to share. Of course, this could all be done easily using the ING wallet, but we'll stick to eSignet for this demonstration. Once the mother provides consent, MOSIP can authenticate her identity and share the details with OpenCRVS, where an authenticated flag is shown, and the form is auto-populated with trusted information that cannot be changed. This same process is then repeated to validate the identity of the father. As you can see here, the father's details has equally been authenticated. Once the form is complete and the registrar registers this vital event, OpenCRVS shares the data with MOSIP and an application ID is shared back with OpenCRVS. As I go to print the certificate for the family, you can see the application ID. This is a tokenized number associated with the unique identification number in the MOSIP system. At this point, the parents will receive an email with the ID card for the child. This card provides the visual identity number for the child. This is the number that the child will have for life. This is another tokenized number associated with the UIN, that is the unique identification number. This is a backend number that would typically not be shown to users, but for the purposes of this demonstration, it is shown here. It is important to state that OpenCRVS never stores the visual identification number. Furthermore, this number can then be used to identify the individual when accessing government services, in this example, logging into the health portal for the country that also uses e-signet. Here, I've successfully logged into the country's health portal using the individual's national ID. Let's fast forward to the end of life for this individual. Their death will now be registered. Using OpenCRVS, I complete the death registration form by entering the deceased's details, including their national ID. Then I will proceed to authenticate the identity of their spouse using e-signet. Upon registration, OpenCRVS shares details of the death with MOSIP. The national ID number is no longer valid, and the user's data is no longer available. To demonstrate this, I will try again to log into the health portal using the national ID. As you can see here, I am unable to log into the health portal as it says that the user's data is no longer available. There you have it. Integration between civil registration and ID demonstrated through OpenCRVS and MOSIP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prince. Now that demonstration was only 5 minutes time. That was being done live using the integration that has been built. It's not just smoke and mirrors. So if you do want to see the details and where it all comes up, like I said, feel free to come to the booth. We've also got our technical lead on the MOSIP and OpenCRVS integration here with us, Puru, who a big shout out to as well. He's done the hard graft on this. So just a couple slides to finish off before if we've got any questions. So what you just saw is what we've built so far. So OpenCRVS integrates with MOSIP eSignet for authentication and consent during the application. That's only currently available online. And on birth registration, the MOSIP NID is created. And obviously on death registration, it's deactivated or invalidated. Now there's so much more to do and we're working on this now. First of all, creating the ability to authenticate and provide consent offline. We talked about being able to operate in low resource settings, and that's something that is in our product backlog. We're also looking at, finally, we've been wanting to do this for ages, developing a verifiable credential. So allowing individuals to hold this data within their wallet. We're going to be doing this with the Inji wallet, but obviously this is going to be possible with any wallet. The ability for when a record is corrected within OpenCRVS, for that to be updating the MOSIP record to make sure that it's still representative. And finally, the ability to search civil registration records by MOSIP ID rather than just the birth registration number that we generate. So that's what we've got planned. And not only that, obviously, like I mentioned, a number of countries in which we're working, we're hoping to demonstrate and actually use this interoperability live and in production in countries who are building a really truly foundational, robust, and comprehensive ID management system. Before we just come to the Q&A, I just want to point out a few resources we've got available. The website, OpenCRVS.org, provides a whole bunch of interesting information about our functionality, interoperability use cases, videos, total cost of ownership, so any questions you've got around that. Our code, obviously, is publicly available. Please go in and see it. Please see whether you can find any vulnerabilities. That's the value, obviously, of an open source product. Our documentation has recently been updated, not just to act as documentation, but it's actually also a fairly comprehensive training modules as well. So that covers things like project management, how to design an effective digital transformation program, including OpenCRVS. It's got all the setup installation if your technical teams want to learn how to set up your own instance. If you want to, as system integrators, conduct a POC, or if your countries, you want to conduct your own. All that stuff's in there. And we've just launched the first implementation partner program with 6 partners currently going through our accreditation scheme. It's our first scheme over the next 12 weeks. We're in week 2, and this is something that we hope to expand. You know, just as MOSIP shared its 90+ partners or so, we're at the beginning of this journey, but we hope to follow in their esteemed footsteps. But that's everything I've got to say, and I don't know if we've got time for a couple of questions. Yeah, wonderful.
My name is Lebeko Sello. I'm from Lesotho. My questions are not about technology, which I've seen, but I'll share a very short story. I have 2 cousins. One of them is my sister, and one of them is my aunt. And the reason is very simple. At the registration of birth, traditionally, if a girl child had a child in the family, that became the parent's child. And there was good reason, it was social protection, all of these things. How do we build that nuance into systems like this?
That is an excellent question. That requires some thought, honestly. I think we'll come to the executive director of NERA, because she might have some thoughts on this. I think how I will answer your question is with the importance of, when designing a system for civil registration, and whether you're using OpenCRVS or not, is to identify these use cases and think about how the system can handle them. The challenge often is, here's a civil registration system, this is how you fill in a form, and so on and so forth, and it doesn't take into account the cultural and traditional approaches, obviously, in each country, which are cultural, right? And so that, for me, is an exercise that should be done, and that we would, for instance, do with countries we work with, to understand how we manage this. Some of that might be able to be managed through technology. Some of it's going to be behavioral change, right? Technology never stands alone, and so the program needs to consider education, potential changes in laws, how we identify duplicates, right? The algorithm maybe needs to be changed, for instance, in that, in your country, in Lesotho, for instance. So I don't have an answer. Madam Rosemary might, but that's what I would encourage all countries. You have to think about the unique use cases of a country, and we need to play those out. And a great way of playing them out, set up a proof of concept, test the system and see what happens, and then see how we can design to be able to take care and manage those use cases effectively and what needs to change. Thanks. Please, Rosemary.
I do understand the nuance from Lesotho, and I would say that if the event is registered in time, it will probably be registered in the hospital, and one of the parents will be known, at least one of the parents. But on the other side of technology, there is the e-consent part of it, and I will explain. The mother of the child will allow, and when the child is at the right age, how much disclosure they want to information that is stored in the system, even as pertaining to relations. So if they don't want a particular relation to be seen, they have a right to say, no, I would like only this information about me to be seen, and the rest is not seen, and the social protection continues. It's at a point whereby you have the comfort to share certain family information. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. But I think that's a really good point. It's another thing that is something we're very passionate about, and why our documentation covers project management and planning. While countries are very eager to get a system out there and start registering births, you need to think up front about designing the system to cater for these use cases, because otherwise you're going to have nonsense data. Half the population aren't going to be registered, and you're going to be creating barriers. So we really do encourage upfront business analysis, design research to ensure that you're catering for these use cases. And maybe we can talk about how you deal with it now. That would be really interesting. Anyone else with any other questions or comments? I've dumbfounded you all. Well, we're incredibly passionate in this area, so if you do want to speak to us, like I said, we're going to be at the booth just as you enter the demonstration hall. Thank you so much for your time, really appreciate it, and yeah, look forward to engaging with you as the week continues. Thank you.